Chapter 8. On a bright June morning, my first dear little charge, and the last of the old Earnshaw line, was born. We were busy with the hay in a distant field when the girl, who usually brought our breakfasts, came running across the meadow and up the lane, calling for me much earlier than usual. "Oh, what a magnificent child!" she exclaimed breathlessly. "The most splendid boy to ever draw breath. But the doctor says the mistress must go. He claims she's been suffering from consumption for months now. I overheard him telling Mr. Hindley. And now she has nothing left to sustain her. She'll be gone before winter. You must return home immediately. You're to care for him, Nellie. Feed him with sugar and milk, and look after him day and night. I envy you, because once the mistress is gone, he'll be all yours." "But is she truly that ill?" I asked, dropping my rake and tutting my bonnet. "I believe she is. Yet she appears remarkably well," the girl replied, "and she speaks as if she expects to live to see him grow into a man. She's delirious with joy. He's such a beautiful child. If I were in her place, I'm sure I wouldn't die. I'd recover just by seeing him despite what Kenneth says." I was furious with him. Dame Archer brought the cherub down to the master in the house, and his face just began to brighten when the old pessimist steps forward and says, "Earnshaw, it's a blessing your wife has been spared to leave you this son. When she arrived, I was certain we wouldn't have her for long. And now, I must tell you, winter will likely be her end. Don't let it trouble you too much. It can't be helped. Besides, you should have known better than to choose such a frail girl." "And what did the master say?" I asked. "I think he cursed, but I didn't pay him any mind. He was too focused on seeing the baby," she said, launching once more into an ecstatic description. Sharing her enthusiasm, I rushed home to see for myself. Though my heart ached for Hindley, he had room in his heart for only two loves, his wife and himself. He cherished both, worshipped one, and I couldn't fathom how he'd cope with such a loss. When we arrived at Wuthering Heights, there he was, standing at the front door. As I entered, I asked, "How's the baby?" "Almost ready to run around, Nell," he answered, forcing a cheerful smile. "And the mistress?" I dared to ask. "The doctor says she's—" "To hell with the doctor!" he cut in, his face flushing. "Frances is fine. She'll be perfectly well by this time next week. Are you going upstairs? Tell her I'll come if she promises not to talk." I left because she wouldn't stop talking, and she must— or tell her Mr. Kenneth insists she needs to rest. I delivered the message to Mrs. Earnshaw, who was in high spirits, and responded with a playful air. "I barely said a word, Ellen, and there he goes, leaving twice in tears. Well, tell him I promise not to speak, but that doesn't mean I can't laugh at him." Poor soul. Her cheerful heart never wavered until just a week before her passing, and her husband stubbornly, even fiercely insisted that she was getting better every day. When Kenneth warned him that his treatments were futile at this stage of her illness, and that he needn't incur further expenses for his visits, he retorted, "I know you don't need to. She's fine. She doesn't need any more of your attention. She was never consumptive. It was a fever and it's gone. Her pulse is as steady as mine now, and her cheek as cool." He told his wife the same tale, and she seemed to believe him. But one night, while resting on his shoulder, just as she was saying she thought she might be able to get up the next day, a slight cough seized her. He lifted her in his arms. She wrapped her hands around his neck. Her expression changed, and she was gone. As the girl had foreseen, young Hareton came entirely under my care. Mr. Earnshaw, as long as he saw the boy healthy and never heard him cry or was satisfied regarding him. For himself, he became desperate. His grief was of the sort that refuses to mourn. He neither wept nor prayed. Instead, he cursed and defied, condemning both God and man, and surrendered himself to reckless indulgence. The servants couldn't endure his tyrannical and wicked behavior for long. Only Joseph and I remained. I couldn't bring myself to abandon my responsibility, and besides, having been his foster sister, I was more inclined to forgive his actions than a stranger might be. Joseph stayed on to browbeat tenants and labourers, as it was his calling to be where there was plenty of wickedness to chastise. The master's vile habits and unsavoury companions set a grim example for Catherine and Heathcliff. His treatment of Heathcliff could have turned a saint into a demon. Indeed, it seemed as though the boy was possessed by something sinister during that time. He took pleasure in watching Hindley degrade himself beyond redemption, and grew increasingly known for his savage sullenness and ferocity. I could scarcely describe the hellish atmosphere of our home. The curate stopped visiting, and no respectable person came near us any more, except, perhaps, for Edgar Linton's visits to Miss Cathy. At 15, she was the reigning beauty of the countryside, unmatched by any peer, and she grew into a proud, willful creature. I confess I didn't care for her much once she outgrew infancy, and I often tried to curb her arrogance, which vexed her. Yet she never developed a dislike for me. She was remarkably loyal to old attachments. Even Heathcliff maintained an unshakable hold on her affections, and young Linton, despite all his advantages, struggled to make as deep an impression. He was my late master. That's his portrait above the fireplace. Once it hung on one side, and his wife's on the other, but hers has been taken down, or else you might glimpse something of who she was. Can you make that out? Mrs. Dean lifted the candle, revealing a gentle face, strikingly similar to the young lady at the Heights, yet more thoughtful and kind in expression. It was a lovely image. Her long, light hair curled softly at the temples. Her eyes were large and contemplative, her figure almost too elegant. I didn't wonder how Catherine Earnshaw could forget her first friend for such a person. I was more puzzled by how he, with a mind as refined as his appearance, could be drawn to my idea of Catherine Earnshaw. "A very pleasing portrait," I remarked to the housekeeper. "Is it accurate?" "Yes," she replied, "but he looked better when animated. That's his usual expression. He generally lacked spirit." Catherine had maintained her connection with the Lintons since her 5-week stay with them, and having no reason to show her rough side in their company, and being wise enough to feel embarrassed about being rude, where she received such consistent courtesy, she unwittingly charmed the old lady and gentleman with her clever warmth, won Isabella's admiration, and captured the heart and soul of her brother, achievements that flattered her from the start, for she was ambitious, and led her to adopt a dual nature without consciously intending to deceive anyone. in the place where she heard Heathcliff called a vulgar young ruffian and worse than a brute. She took care not to behave like him, but at home she had little desire to practice politeness that would only be mocked, and saw no reason to restrain an unruly nature when it would earn her neither credit nor praise. Mr. Edgar rarely found the nerve to visit Wuthering Heights openly. He was intimidated by Earnshaw's fearsome reputation and dreaded any confrontation with him. Yet, whenever he did come, we made our best efforts to be polite. The master himself refrained from offending Edgar, fully aware of the reason for his visits. If he couldn't be gracious, he simply kept out of sight. I suspect Catherine found his presence there unwelcome. She wasn't manipulative and never played the flirt, clearly preferring that her two friends never crossed paths. When Heathcliff openly scorned Linton in front of him, she couldn't fully agree, as she might have in his absence. Similarly, when Linton showed his disdain for Heathcliff, she couldn't dismiss his feelings as if her playmate's belittlement meant nothing to her. I often laughed at her dilemmas and the silent struggles she tried so hard to conceal from my teasing. That may sound unkind, but her pride was such that it was impossible to feel sorry for her troubles until she learned some humility. Eventually, she did open up and confide in me, as there was no one else she could turn into a confidant. One afternoon, Mr. Hindley was away, and Heathcliff took the liberty of giving himself a break. He was about 16 then, and though he wasn't unattractive or lacking in intelligence, he managed to project an aura of both internal and external repulsiveness that his current appearance no longer shows. By that time, he had lost the advantages of his early education. Relentless hard labor starting early and ending late had extinguished any curiosity he once had for learning and any affection for books or study. The sense of superiority that had been nurtured in him during his childhood by old Mr. Earnshaw's favoritism had long since dissipated. He fought hard to maintain an intellectual parity with Catherine in their studies, but ultimately surrendered, feeling a deep yet unspoken sorrow. Once he realized he would inevitably fall below his previous standing, he refused to make any effort to rise again. His outward appearance mirrored this internal decline. He developed a slouched posture and an unrefined demeanor. His naturally reserved nature intensified into an almost absurd level of unsociable gloom, and he seemed to take a dark satisfaction in provoking dislike rather than earning respect from the few people he knew. Despite this, Catherine remained his constant companion during his breaks from work. However, he no longer verbalized his affection for her and reacted with defensive suspicion to her youthful displays of affection, as if aware that such gestures held no real pleasure for him. On the occasion in question, he entered the house to declare his intention of doing nothing while I was helping Miss Cathy with her attire. She hadn't expected him to decide on idleness and, thinking she would have the place to herself, had somehow informed Mr. Edgar of her brother's absence and was preparing to welcome him. "Heathcliff, are you busy this afternoon?" asked Cathy. "Are you going anywhere?" "No, it's raining," she replied. "Why are you wearing that silk dress?" he asked. "I hope no one's coming over?" "Not that I'm aware of," Miss stammered. "But shouldn't you be out in the field, Heathcliff? It's been an hour since dinner. I thought you'd left." Hindley rarely spares us from his cursed presence," the boy remarked. "I'm not working any more today. I'll stay with you." "But Joseph will tell," she warned. "You should go." "Joseph's busy loading lime on the far side of Penistone Crags. It'll keep him until dark, and he'll never know." With that, he sauntered over to the fire and sat down. Catherine paused, furrowing her brow. She needed to make room for his presence. "Isabella and Edgar Linton mentioned they might visit this afternoon," she said after a moment's silence. "With the rain, I doubt they'll come. But if they do, you'll risk getting scolded for nothing. Tell Ellen to say you're busy, Kathy," he insisted. "Don't send me away for those trivial, foolish friends of yours. Sometimes I'm tempted to complain but I won't." "That they what?" Catherine demanded, looking at him with a troubled expression. "Oh, Nellie," she snapped, pulling her head away from my hands. "You've completely straightened my curls. That's enough. Leave me be. What are you about to complain about, Heathcliff?" "Nothing. Just take a look at the calendar on the wall," he said, gesturing to a framed sheet near the window. "The crosses mark the evenings you spent with the Lintons, the dots for those with me. Do you see? I've recorded every day." "Yes, how silly. As if I paid attention," Catherine replied irritably. "And what's the point of that?" "To show that I do pay attention," Heathcliff replied. "And am I supposed to sit with you all the time?" she demanded, her irritation growing. "What do I gain from it? What do you even talk about? You might as well be mute, or a child, for all the entertainment or engagement you offer." "You've never told me before that I speak too little, or that you dislike my company, Cathy," Heathcliff exclaimed, visibly shaken. "It's no company at all when people know nothing and say nothing," she muttered under her breath. Her companion stood up, but before he could voice his thoughts, the sound of a horse's hooves echoed on the stone path. After a gentle knock, young Linton entered, his face alight with joy at the unexpected invitation. Catherine surely noticed the stark contrast between her friends, as one departed and the other arrived. It was like trading a harsh, rugged coal landscape for a lush, fertile valley. His demeanour and greeting were as distinct as his appearance. He spoke in a sweet, gentle tone, pronouncing his words with a softness unfamiliar here. "I'm not too early, am I?" he asked, glancing in my direction as I busied myself wiping a plate and organizing some drawers at the far end of the dresser. "No," Catherine replied. "What are you doing there, Nellie?" "My work, miss," I answered. Mr. Hindley had instructed me to be present during any private visits Linton might make. Catherine stepped behind me and whispered irritably, "Take yourself and your dusters elsewhere. When there's company in the house, servants don't start cleaning and tidying in the room where they are. It's a good chance now that the master is away," I said aloud. "He can't stand me fussing over these things when he's around. I'm sure Mr. Edgar will understand." "I can't stand you fussing in my presence either," the young lady snapped, cutting off her guest before he could respond. She hadn't regained her composure since her spat with Heathcliff. "I'm sorry for that, Miss Catherine," I replied, continuing diligently with my task. Thinking Edgar couldn't see her, she snatched the cloth from my hand and pinched my arm with a vicious twist. I've mentioned before that I didn't love her and took a certain pleasure in deflating her vanity now and then. Besides, she hurt me terribly, so I jumped up from my knees and cried out, "Oh, Miss, that's a mean trick. You have no right to pinch me, and I won't stand for it." "I didn't touch you, you liar," she shouted, her fingers itching to repeat the offense, her ears flushed with anger. She could never hide her temper. It always set her entire face ablaze. "What's this, then?" I retorted, displaying the undeniable purple mark as evidence against her claim. She stamped her foot and hesitated for a moment, and then, driven by the mischievous spirit within her, slapped me across the cheek, a sharp blow that brought tears to my eyes. "Catherine, my love." "Catherine," interjected Linton, visibly disturbed by the dual transgressions of deceit and aggression committed by the one he idolized. "Leave the room, Ellen," she demanded again, her entire body trembling. Little Hareton, who shadowed me everywhere and was sitting nearby on the floor, began to cry upon seeing my tears. He sobbed out grievances against wicked Aunt Cathy, which only redirected her wrath onto his unfortunate head. She grabbed his shoulders and shook him until the poor child turned pale, prompting Edgar to impulsively grab her hands to rescue him. In a flash, one hand broke free, and the bewildered young man felt it strike his ear in a manner that left no room for misunderstanding. He recoiled in shock. I picked up Hareton and carried him to the kitchen, leaving the door ajar, eager to see how they would resolve their conflict. The affronted guest moved toward where he had placed his hat, his face pale and his lip trembling. "That's right," I thought to myself. "Take heed and leave. It's a mercy to give you a glimpse of her true nature." "Where are you going?" Catherine demanded, stepping towards the door. He veered to the side, trying to slip past her. "You can't leave," she insisted, her voice full of determination. "I must, and I will," he replied quietly. "No," she insisted, gripping the handle firmly. "Not yet, Edgar Linton. Sit down. You can't leave me like this. I'd be miserable all night, and I refuse to be miserable because of you." "How can I stay after you've hit me?" Linton asked. Catherine fell silent. "You've made me afraid and ashamed of you," he continued. "I won't come back here again." Her eyes began to shimmer, and her eyelids fluttered. "And you lied outright," he accused. "I didn't," she shouted, finding her voice again. "I didn't do anything on purpose." "Fine. Go if you want. Just go. And now I'll cry. I'll cry until I'm sick." She sank to her knees beside a chair and began to weep in earnest. Edgar stuck to his decision and made it as far as the courtyard. There, he hesitated. I decided to urge him on. "Miss is terribly unpredictable, sir," I shouted. "As troublesome as any spoiled child. You'd best head home, or she'll make herself sick just to upset us." He glanced sideways through the window, as powerless to leave as a cat is to abandon a half-dead mouse or a bird half-eaten. "Ah," I thought, "there's no saving him. He's destined for this, rushing headlong into it." And indeed, it was so. He turned sharply, hurried back into the house, and closed the door behind him. When I entered a little later to inform them that Earnshaw had returned home, wildly drunk and ready to tear the place apart. His usual state in such a condition. I saw that their quarrel had only deepened their connection, had shattered the barriers of youthful shyness, allowing them to drop the pretense of friendship and admit they were lovers. News of Mr. Hindley's arrival sent Linton quickly to his horse and Catherine to her room. I went to hide a little Hareton and to remove the shot from the master's fowling piece, which he liked to brandish in his frenzied excitement, endangering anyone who provoked or even caught his attention too much. I had devised this plan to minimize harm if he ever did fire the gun.